I feel like I need to make a video on this because people ask me about this all the time. Kajor, what's the meta? Should we play the meta? How do you play insert meta composition or meta hero? I'm not here to gaslight you into thinking that meta doesn't exist or that it's completely useless, but that you shouldn't be caring about it nearly as much as you probably are. So of course, I have to begin with what meta is in the first place. Traditionally, it stands for the most effective tactic available. It's a pretty broad definition, especially if we try to define what effective means, but in short, quote-unquote meta heroes get insane value when properly played across most situations. In other words, they have a high value cap. To help decrypt why meta doesn't matter for most players, it's going to be pretty useful to look at value caps or value ceilings. A value cap is just the maximum possible value that you can get from a hero once you reach their skill cap. Value caps can change based on the map you play the hero and the comps you're playing against, but I'll talk about that later. For now, with this concept of value caps in mind, if you look at tier lists, they're really just an average measurement of value caps, with heroes in S tier, like Tracer, having the biggest, highest value cap in the game, and conversely, with heroes in D tier, having the lowest value caps in the game. The question we then need to ask ourselves is, well, how useful is this information? The short answer is basically fuck all. The longer answer is, it depends, but still probably fuck all. I say that because value caps only become useful when we're talking about the very top end of the player base, i.e. most people who aren't watching this video. If you're someone who just searches tier list on YouTube, scroll to the end and you just play the heroes that the creator puts at S tier without any pinch of salt or without any thought as to how to play them, you're not gonna get much long-term results. It doesn't matter if Tracer or Lucio or Winston is in S tier if you can't bloody play them. The sad reality is that people want quick fixes. Not just quick actually, they want the lowest, easiest path to resistance. They want to climb the ranks without actually putting the effort into getting better at the game. Now here's where I have to be careful, because two things can be true at once. On one hand, yes, there are reasons to play one hero over another, and yes, you could swap to a hero that is better in a specific matchup. If you're playing D.Va into Zarya on King's Row, you could swap off the D.Va and go Reinhardt or Ramattra and roll that Zarya over. But also, you could stick on that D.Va and take angles around the Zarya that you can't reach and actually learn to play the matchup. In other words, it's important to know when to swap off certain heroes, absolutely, but equally, it is also very important to know how to play those heroes in disadvantageous matchups. There will be times when you can't swap, and more importantly, there'll be times where you counter swap, but your opponent will know how to play that disadvantageous matchup, and you're the one who needs to actually adapt. There's also the logic of jack of all trades, master of none. In other words, if you constantly counter swap to different heroes and you end up having a wide hero pool as a result, you'll just be mid at every hero, instead of being really good at one or two heroes. The great thing about that too is that you can transfer those skills from those one or two heroes that you get really good at to the rest of the hero cast. It's why whenever a new hero comes out, like Venture right now, top 500 Echo or Genji or Tracer or Reaper players are still going to be top 500 on Venture, because they can transfer the fundamental skills, especially stuff like timing and positioning, over to Venture. And if you want some help to reach the value caps of the heroes that you play, check the description down below to get my coaching. Okay, so value caps and playing the meta doesn't really matter in most ranks because people are nowhere near close to playing the meta heroes correctly. But what if we climb higher and higher? Surely meta starts mattering more then, right? And you're not wrong, especially when Overwatch is in a particularly unbalanced state. The leaderboards do tend to reflect that, and people do end up leaning towards the meta heroes. But despite all that, there are still your outliers. But how and why? There's actually a few reasons for this. I could talk about how players in top 500 still stack main on occasion and actually aren't near the value caps of their heroes. And I could also talk about how the value caps for most heroes, on average, doesn't actually vary that much. If I bring up that tier list again, the gap between S and C tier is really quite marginal, even S and D tier. If it wasn't, you wouldn't see players that get GM OTPing Lifeweaver. But I actually want to talk about how value caps can vary quite a bit. Specifically, value caps can vary from map to map and from what comps you play your hero into. To help illustrate this, let's use the example of Junkrat, a stereotypically niche hero that most people will put pretty down low in their tier lists. Just based on map, if you were to play Junkrat on Lijiang Control Center where the map is really enclosed, or on King's Row where the first point high ground can be really narrow and is great for Junkrat spam, your potential value cap here on Junkrat is gonna be higher than if you decided to play him on Havana or Junkertown. And for reference, he's still playable on those two maps, but when we're talking about the top end of the game, maps can really affect value caps. Echo is notoriously bad against Sombra Tracer because she can get 2v1'd quite easily. As a result, she needs to be super careful about the angles she takes. But if the map has super long sightlines, or has a ton of high ground that Sombra Tracer can't get to, like Ilios Well or Ilios Lighthouse, the potential value that you can get on Echo is significantly higher. Compositions can also affect value caps as well. Junkrat is one of the best anti-brawl heroes in the game because of how reliable his spam becomes and how great his mines are for disruption. But the second you play Junkrat against D.Va Pharmacy, it's not looking good for Bossman. So what about teamplay? Should you play meta in a high level team environment? The answer is both yes and no. OC made a video explaining the whole count swapping debate, which I'm not gonna go over here because I already did that with my Samito saga, but yes, meta does matter at high level play, otherwise it wouldn't exist and people would just play whatever hero they wanted. Then again, there is also the strategic element that's actually recently come to the forefront. If there's two teams that are playing against each other and Team A is worse than Team B on the exact same meta comp, does Team A stick to the meta just because it's meta, or do they try and switch things up? Intuitively, you'd want to switch things up, but often, a lot of the time, teams don't. They just take the quote-unquote meta mirror. This was spoken about on the Pro Overwatch podcast on Coachable, featuring some of the greatest Western coaches in the scene, and I think this minute clip summarizes the position quite well.
When I watch the Korean region, I think they still haven't caught up to that yet. I still watch too many teams who are 2-7, full mirror whack, and go 0-3 in the most predictable outcome possible. Like, I still don't see any of them like truly try to win the series in a like dishonest way.
Even though Atlanta had so much demonstrable success avoiding the mirror and countering perma, it was still, let's grind out the meta, not let's play to our strengths, you know? And I feel like there has to be something cultural there.
We committed to the Hog comp in playoffs, and it was so obvious to me, and I said it so many times, we are losing every scrim to every team on this matchup. Okay, I accept Hog is fucking busted. This cannot be the way to win grand finals. And we just stuck it out, and we just mirrored it, and we went 0-3, and we went home. One thing that you can say about Europe is, like, I was thinking about it, in the top four, the big four, there wasn't a single mirror match that entire fucking like series, right? All four teams had like a power ranking of who wins on each comp, and were actually intentionally taking matchups which gave them the best chance to win. And I don't see that in other regions. And I think that is 100% the optimal way to play Overwatch, is to realize when you can't win a mirror.
So if you shouldn't care about meta, what should you care about instead? I think the most important thing to care about is your strength as a player or as a team if you're in one. The team I'm on, for example, is a Bull, Sim and Moira one-trick team playing one of the least meta comps you can think of, yet more often than not, we can make it work. I'm not going to tell these guys to start playing meta all of a sudden, because even if it's theoretically better, that doesn't matter if my players can't play the comp. There's also the motivational aspect too. In other words, if you put players on heroes that they're more comfortable on and they find more enjoyable, they're naturally going to want to learn that hero more and spend time learning disadvantageous matchups. It's a much better long-term strategy for their own mental and for their own performance. You can go all the way with this. You can see teams like Oh Yeah, who have players like Kajor, probably the best Junkrat one-trick in the world, who manages to make it work because he's insanely good at the hero. Obviously, the takeaway isn't to become a Junkrat one-trick, it's just to play your strengths. Now, of course, this brings up the question, what if we are playing to our strengths, but we're still losing? What if we're playing to our strengths, but it just so happens to be the meta, and we end up in a mirror that we just lose in? The answer to that question will depend, obviously. Maybe it's just Occam's razor, and you need more scrim experience to get the macro down. Or maybe you can take a more nuanced approach, and make a few small tweaks to your composition to help give you the edge over the enemy team, while still playing to your strength stylistically. This is actually happening quite a bit in Europe, where a lot of the swaps are between Kiriko and Moira, as well as between Ramatra, Mauga and Orisa, heroes that are stylistically similar. They're not playing some crazy Sigma Illari Zen comp at all, they're just playing slight variations or more hybrid variations of the comp. In conclusion, you're probably grossly overestimating the importance of meta. If you're in gold, it hardly even matters, And even in top 500, you should be considering how to out-strategize the enemy team if taking a mirror on the meta comp leads to a definitive loss. Stuff like this, especially on the team level, can get really team specific, so all the advice might not apply in the video, but I think the Overwatch community as a whole puts way too much stock on the meta. As always, let me know your thoughts down below, and until next time.